All right, guys, as promised, we're going to talk a little bit less, I think, today about three-true outcome, and today it's a little bit more about baseball strategy. So let me bring up a hypothetical for you. So some of you may know this. It's been a while since I've really spent time with this. I have another Substack blog and another YouTube channel called Action Football Sundays, in which I played a lot of American football games. I played a number of them as part of a 1980 Cleveland Browns replay that was interrupted by myself, mostly because of some frustrations with the game. You don't need to get too deep into the reasons why there. But there's something interesting when you think about football. So imagine for yourself a world in which football teams do nothing but pass. Imagine a world in which everybody associated with the game, everybody who studies the game and analyzes it, says that, it's obvious to us that passing gives us the best way to make the most amount of yardage and score the most amount of points given the resources available, especially time. And therefore, it is advisable for us to pass as much as possible, like on every down. Now, I'll tell you, I know that teams do play like this, right? When I was a kid, I used to go to BYU football games with my dad down in Provo, Utah, right? We had season tickets starting when I was 6 years old. This was 1990. The first game I ever went to was when Miami came in to play BYU and lost. That was the year of Ty Detmer's Heisman Trophy. And while BYU didn't necessarily run on or pass on every down, it felt like it sometimes. You expected them to pass on first down. They always passed on third down, and about half the time they passed on second down, right? And you think, so what's wrong with that? You get a lot of, you get the ball up in the air, you take advantage of the rarefied mountain air, and you're able to, move the ball down the field. It's really exciting. There is a problem with that. The problem is called defense, right? If this were to happen, say, in the NFL, if you were to have teams that actually were going to pass every down, I know that some teams come close to that, so you don't have to tell me. If this were to happen and if this were to be the default, then defenses would play back. They would play back and expect the pass. Maybe they rush three guys. Maybe they would blitz every once in a while to keep the quarterback honest, right? But you would have less of a need to worry about even the quarterback running or the team's calling a draw play or whatever, because you know that the offensive coordinator is saying we need to pass every down no matter what, right? So if that were to happen, despite the fact that on paper it seems that this would be an offensive bonanza for American football, the actual effect that you would have would be lower scores and would be better defense, because the defense knows exactly what the offense is doing. The element of surprise is completely gone, right? What this means is that every single play you would come and line up the same way. You wouldn't have to worry about stacking the line with guys like they used to do back in the old days, right? Instead, you would have a much more wide open defense, play a lot of zone defense or play a lot of sort of combinations if you wanted to, if you needed to key somebody or whatever. And football would turn into a very predictable sport. Now, there is an argument that we can make in the NFL. I know this is a baseball channel. You can make the argument that in the 1970s, before the change in the passing interference rule, you actually had this, but the other way around. Every team was expecting the other teams to run the majority of the time. I mean, look at the 72 Dolphins and how rarely they would pass, right? I know you go pick up Madden or whatever, and you get people who will pass with them all the time, but if you actually look at the statistics, they wouldn't even pass most of the time on third down. The idea was to try to gain 3 or 4 yards every single down so you could run again on third, and you could just sort of inch your way slowly across the field and use up the clock. Right? There's a lot of things about this analogy that you're going to see that go wrong, right? Baseball is different. There's not much of a clock in baseball. But I will argue that when it comes to the offensive structure of teams, that it becomes a lot easier for the defense and for the pitching if every single hitter goes up expecting to do the same thing. If every hitter in baseball is trying to drive the ball and is trying to pull the ball, it becomes obvious that you can use certain tactics and certain strategies that wouldn't work otherwise. For example, the infield shift. I know they can't do it anymore. It's illegal. They decided to change the rules, right? The reason why the infield shift worked is because every hitter is a power hitter and every hitter is trying to pull the ball. And so as a pitcher, regardless of what the batted against balls in play people will say, I know the pitcher has no influence over this. The truth is that the pitcher can pitch the ball in a certain way to make it look attractive to the hitter, to make him try to pull it, right? And to end up pulling it into the shift where you have 8 defenders, right? I don't say this because this is theoretical. This actually happened in baseball, and it happened not that long ago, right? If every hitter is coming up trying to do the exact same thing at the plate, which is what you have today, suddenly pitching becomes a lot easier, and suddenly it becomes obvious what the strategy is against every single hitter, and the same thing will work every single time, right? That will give you your increase in strikeouts, that will give you a decrease in runs scored, and it creates a game in which, like our theoretical football game, it's about all or nothing, right? In baseball, it turns into if you hit the ball and you don't hit a home run, you're probably not going to get a hit, right? In football, it turns into if you try for a passing play, you either, connect for a big yardage pass, because remember, it's probably more efficient for us to run down the field and to throw a bunch of screen passes, right? That's the same thing as running in this theoretical sense, right? And so, you either get a big gain or you get your passing interference call or you throw an incomplete pass, right? What we're seeing in baseball and what we've seen over the years is the equivalent of having teams pass on every single down in football. That is what things are like, right? We do have a running game that's come back this year because they made it easier to steal bases, because they changed the basic rules of the game and changed the size of the bags, right? If they had not done this, stolen bases would have continued to go downward, right? Because the old school running game is not so important when every single batter is up trying to sock the ball as hard and hit it as far as they possibly can. Baseball games today, I hate to say this for those of you who are fans, baseball games today are insufferably dull. The reason why young people don't watch the game is because they never got into the habit of watching it. And the reason why they didn't get into the habit of watching it is because when grandpa or when dad was watching the game and the youngster sat down to watch it, he's thinking it's the same thing every time. Why does it look like the same thing every time? Because every hitter is trying to do the same thing at the plate. Try to get the pitcher to throw more pitches, right? Try to foul balls off instead of putting the ball you didn't want to hit into play, right? And teams are trying to do the same thing. Instead of having multiple runners on base and trying for like a double steal or trying for a bunch or trying for something to make something happen, everybody is swinging from the heels and trying to hit for power. The reason why is because we know that it is more efficient offensively, but what has happened is the defense has learned that this is what's happening. It gives the defense an advantage, right? That's what I'm talking about here. So while it is true, it is unmistakably true that the correct way to play offense, to increase efficiency, is to play the power game. It's not necessarily the best way to play baseball, and it's not necessarily the way that will cause teams to win. Games these days, unfortunately, are very, very boring, and they're boring because you don't have any variation in offense. It's just a bunch of different guys who do the same thing, wearing different uniforms, wearing different costumes coming in every week. I think it was Jerry Seinfeld who once said that, in professional sports, you're really cheering for laundry. In modern baseball, that's literally what's happening, and you can't even predict what colors the other team's going to wear because of all these different uniform variations and everything. I know I sound like an old man, but it's true. I mean, that's kind of what's going on. It's just not a recognizable sport anymore. A lot of this stuff is designed to make money through merchandising and other sales, but it makes the sport look really strange, right? But the biggest problem that you have is that you don't have teams that are like, I don't know, like the 85 Cardinals that will come up and try to, get slap base hits on the turf and try to play almost like they're cheating and will run around and try to score as many runs as they can without getting any power hits, right? You don't see teams that are focused maybe not so much on hitting, but rather on exceptionally good pitching, right? Like your 86 Mets or your 69 Mets or teams like that. You don't see teams like, the New York Giants from, 1911 or so, which was also based upon trying to steal a lot of bases and trying to force the game at the opposition, right? You just don't see these types of strategies anymore, right? Part of it is because, it's kind of ridiculous, to play for one run exclusively, right? We do know what is actually, what is efficient in terms of offense. But if every single player is playing that way, now that's a little bit different, and that's kind of a problem. You don't see guys like, Ricky Henderson going up and finding out ways to get on base and then being a complete terror on the base pads every time he's on. There's nothing like that, and the truth is, and it's sad to say this, but Ricky Henderson today probably wouldn't be able to make it out of the minors into the major leagues. Why? Because he wouldn't drive the ball when he was very, very young in his career, right? That's the problem, right? You don't even see, and this is the real shocker, you probably wouldn't see players today like Ozzie Smith, right? he was a great defender. We've had a lot of great defenders who didn't make it to the major leagues. The problem, of course, is that Ozzie Smith was a stereotypical slap hitter. I mean, he was awful when he was in San Diego, goes over to St. Louis where they embrace that style, and eventually he ends up being able to hit for average and they find a place for him in the lineup. But, I mean, that's the problem, right? There's no place in the game for players who don't play in that sort of power mentality. Now, you can talk about, we should do something at the major league level to change this. It's going to have no effect. The reason why it will have no effect is because this goes all the way down to youth baseball. This goes all the way down to the lowest levels. The reason why is because everybody knows if you go into anything involved with baseball, anything in the industry, like, the youth baseball industry and stuff like that, look at any of the hitting gurus, they will all tell you the same thing, which is that you need to hit for power. Right? That's the reason why these guys talk so much about swing angles. That's the reason why these guys are talking so much about, your launch angle and all this stuff, even with kids who are like 10 or 11, right? The reason why is because if you want to impress the scouts, you have to be a power hitter, right? That's all that they're looking for. They're not going to take a chance on some kid who, maybe his bat's not there yet, but he has some speed, or he flashes great glove or something like that. It doesn't happen today. Everybody's got to be a power hitter. We see that impact if you follow the draft. I don't. Or if you look at minor league teams, you'll see that impact all over the place. Everybody's a power hitter. Everybody looks very, very familiar. That is the reason, in my opinion, why baseball continues to be very boring, because it's the same type of player up over and over and over again. It's become the league of Adam Dunn, right? To quote another old baseball primer meme that most people have forgotten. Right? That's the problem with the game today. Everybody is the same type of hitter. Everybody is up there doing the same thing, and therefore the defense will do the same type of thing for every single hitter. And, it's just a question of different names out there doing the same thing and representing the same thing. This is a huge problem. It's not going to go away no matter what they do with the sport and with, everything else that's associated with it, right? I mean, could you imagine watching boxing matches if every single, boxer came up with the exact same approach, trying to do the exact same thing? You would get bored silly. Could you imagine watching, UFC if everybody was using the same different type of, MMA to fight against each other, right? It would get really old really quick, right? This is the problem that baseball has. Everybody's doing the same thing. There's no variation. No variation is allowed. And it's going to end up being the death of the sport. If they don't figure out a way to make there be some sort of variation in how the sport is played and to help teams actually have identities again, the sport is just going to completely die out. I mean, it's going to turn into, and I think I've said this before, it's going to turn into what horse racing is today, a sport that was once significant and once important in this country that's played mostly now for the sake of tradition, and that frankly most people don't follow or care about. So there's my take on that. I'd love to know what you think. I'll talk to you later. Bye.